Hi, this is Cheryl Gallant, your Conservative Member of Parliament for the Freedom Ready riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. Parliament is rising today, so let's take a look at where we are. Yesterday, the National Defence and Canadian Armed Forces Ombudsman held a press conference. He issued draft legislation to get the military on track. The government had sat on the report for 6 months, refusing to allow him to release the report. His action plan is straightforward. He called for making the Office of the Defense Ombudsman independent. During the press conference, he gave example after example of the minister and the department interfering in his investigations. Quote, "When leaders turn a blind eye to our recommendations and concerns in order to advance political interests and their own self-preservation or career advancement, it is the members of the defense community that suffer the consequences." End of quote. The Ombudsman said the minister would delay the release of reports by stalling on the responses. Even when the minister's office did respond, it was incoherent. The Ombudsman said the political interference continues to this very day. He gave an example of the Defense Department trying to control the questions the Ombudsman could ask during this latest investigation. As he said about this government, and quote, "It is clear that inaction is rewarded far more than action." End quote. Inaction is rewarded. That could be the motto for the Trudeau Liberals. Yesterday, during question period, when Minister Sagen was called on to respond to the Ombudsman, he ignored the question. Remember, inaction is rewarded. Instead of answering the question, he whined and complained about how mean the Conservatives were being to him. He even tried to invoke his position as a military veteran. Well, he has dishonored the uniform worn by every woman and man in the service of our country. We all remember when, as defense minister, he claimed he was the architect of Operation Medusa. Claiming credit for the service of others is called stolen valor in the military. Now we have a case of Liberal Minister Harjit Sagen stealing valor from retired Lieutenant Colonel Harjit Sagen. Not a single member of Parliament has ever dismissed or diminished his service in uniform to our country. As a soldier, he served Canada honorably. As a politician, he has behaved dishonorably. I hope he'll reflect back to when he did put the interests of Canadians ahead of his political career and that of his leader. Minister Sagen, it's not too late for you to do the right thing and resign. By ignoring this call to resign, he only confirms what the Ombudsman said. Inaction is rewarded. Speaking of this Liberal government rewarding itself for taking no action, take a look at the exchange in question period.
To airline and airport employees who just want a plan. They want benchmarks. And there is science to support those benchmarks. In fact, the government's own expert panel provided these benchmarks. The hotel quarantine program is not scientific. It's not based in any fact, and people need hope. So I'm asking the parliamentary secretary to take the concerns of this group really seriously, to resist the urge to provide that sort of, partisan response, and just explain to Canadians when the Liberals will provide benchmarks for lifting federal COVID-19 restrictions.
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, once again, we have taken the concerns of Canadians seriously throughout this pandemic. It's the opposition in their own caucus who can't seem to get their story straight when it comes to which measures they want to follow. But Mr. Speaker, every step of the way, we are guided by science and evidence. Throughout this pandemic, we have had to adapt and adjust as the virus has changed. We've done so to keep Canadians safe and to save lives. While the member opposite want to play politics, we are taking this virus seriously, and we have put in place a cautious approach to make sure that the hard work that all Canadians has done is not lost. That's what our government is committed to. We are taking care of Canadians. Conservatives continue to play politics.
Michelle asked a clear, simple, nonpartisan question. In response, the Liberal parliamentary secretary went on the rampage. The Liberals could not answer Michelle's question as to when the government will announce benchmarks for reopening the country. All of the provinces have announced their benchmarks. Some of you think those provincial benchmarks to reopen will happen too quickly, while others think they're too high and reopening will be later than need be. That's fine. We could debate that all day, and we have. But that is not what is happening. The Liberals are not providing benchmarks at all. They're not making decisions based on logic. They're looking at the polls, the tea leaves of electoral gain. The Trudeau Liberals will not do anything to upset their far left base before the election. This is a Liberal base so anti-American, they prefer the land border never be reopened. It doesn't matter if the vaccines work and case rates are plummeting. You still see people driving alone, windows rolled up with their face masks on. People still afraid of COVID, even after getting both doses, are the Liberal base. And the Trudeau Liberals will do nothing to allay these fears before the next election. Why would they? Fear-mongering is the entire Liberal campaign strategy. If it's not soldiers in the streets, it'll be unvaccinated Americans in the stores. So do not expect any benchmarks for the border to reopen soon. Remember, inaction is rewarded. Canadians can see right through this government's recycled excuses. That's not the kind of transparency Canadians are owed. The Prime Minister is the boy who cried national security wolf once too often. Canadians remember how this government invoked the National Security Act as an excuse to keep a sole-sourced contract for parkas secret. These weren't military parkas, they were parkas for refugees. And the government covered up the contract. Lawful firearms owners have taken this government to court challenging the scary-looking firearms ban. They've learned all government evidence to justify the gun grab has been deemed a national security secret. Hotel quarantine costs, national security secret. Vaccine contracts, national security secret. Prime Minister's sock budget, national security secret. This isn't how a democratic society is supposed to work. It's time for the Trudeau Liberals to stop crying national security wolf every time it's got embarrassing information it wants to hide. Yesterday at 1:30 in the morning, while most Canadians were fast asleep, the Liberals, Bloc, and NDP joined together to pass their Internet Censorship Act. When I first announced this bill last November, I could never have imagined just how much worse it could get. In order to force this bill through the House of Commons before summer, the Liberals and the Bloc forced the committee to cut off the study. They limited debate and ran through a bunch of amendments with no review. Make no mistake, those undemocratic means have undemocratic ends. If the Liberals were not so intent on censoring the internet, before an election, why would they take so much flack for forcing the bill through? The censorship bill now goes on to the Senate, where the Conservative senators have called for a lengthy, detailed review. If the Senate makes even one amendment, the bill will have to come back to the House of Commons. Then, in desperation to rob us of free speech, the Liberals will recall MPs during the summer to Ottawa to pass their censorship bill. Let the senators know what you think about this bill by clicking on the link below in the comment section. Live from Ottawa, this is Cheryl Gallant, wishing you a good night.